Of course, I'm sure we're all familiar with the old adage of knowledge is power. It can also be understood that civilization is built off of the shoulders of the generations that came before. So imagine what could be done with a place that held the fathomless knowledge and tales of those that came before. Though what if I were to tell you of such a place? A place that held all manner of literature, from scientific to mathematical discoveries, even to quaint fairy tales, or even some of the darkest and most esoteric secrets the universe has to offer. A place which has since disappeared from the foreboding eons of time, though there are some things so inimical to the very mind of mankind that maybe they're best left unknown. Do you like games? I'm sure you love games. I like games too. I especially like it when small children are separated from their parents and dragged into hellish realities. And if you like that too, then boy do I have the game for you. I mean, I guess it is also a horror puzzle game with an interesting story and mystery to uncover, but, you know, priorities. Of course, I should start off by saying that the demo to Lost Library is out and there will be a link to it to play for free in the description. So about 2 years ago I started work on a cute little game in RPG Maker. It was about a little girl who gets trapped in another worldly reality while looking for her little brother. Back then it was called Black Library, and it was a very short game made entirely with the free assets that came with RPG Maker, though many of them somewhat modified. Of course, the little girl you play as was Victoria, and the whole point of the game was you are just looking for your little brother. All you really had to do was solve a couple puzzles to find him and then escape, and the way you solved the puzzles would just change the ending. Back then it was just called Black Library, and at some point I kind of gave up on it. But several months ago, thinking about the story and what it could have been, I decided to come back to the game. I wasn't that happy with what I made, and so I rebuilt the entire thing with my own unique assets. Let it be known here now that most of the assets in this game were made with MS Paint. There are a lot of assets, like some of the bookshelves for example, that I've taken from, RPG Maker, though they have been, heavily modified. Look man, I bought RPG Maker fair and square. I can use as many of their assets as I want, fight me about it. But for the most part I rebuilt the game ground up from my own assets, but I've expanded the story, I've expanded the cast of characters, and the puzzles, what actually happens in it. It ended up becoming far bigger than I originally anticipated. Now, Lost Library is an extremely story narrative driven game, which I'm not going to discuss because part of it is the mystery behind it. You are supposed to uncover the story. The purpose here is that for those who enjoyed the demo, for me to explain things a little bit more. But since it's such a narrative driven game, we are going to have to get into a little bit of the story. You play as a young lass called Victoria. You start off in a town library, and after a short conversation with Miss Lever, it kind of implies that not everything is quite right with old Vicky. And as she returns home, she finds that something's changed, reality is different, in which she's dragged to the library. Another reality which takes the form of a dilapidated old building. While it's very clear that this place has not been touched in a very, very long time, there are still signs of people having been here previously. But who and why? Though are these questions really worth finding out as the library gets more dangerous the deeper you go? That pretty much is the premise for the game's story. I mentioned Victoria's baby brother. He's not in it, he's since been zapped from existence. I mean, a story involving a young girl trying to save a baby brother is really cute, so, he may not be completely cut from the full game, but as it stands, he's not in it. But you see, the story of Lost Library really lends itself to me just kind of putting in whatever I want, because it's a very branching narrative. It is designed to split off into all sorts of different storylines. Within the library you can uncover many different little side quests and other stories that you can accomplish. And with the way the story works, what it effectively does is that there are a few storylines that if you go through to completion will bring the game to an end. However, there are many side stories, and the side stories that you complete will change the ending of the game. And so while some of the game stories don't have, they don't bring the game to an end, if you complete them, they will still change the outcome. The way it's effectively being designed is each character basically has their own story, effectively, which sometimes crosses over and overlaps. It's difficult to explain, mainly because I haven't fully designed it yet, but what is one of the biggest appeals of Lost Library is the branching story narratives, which are all designed to encourage your exploration of the library, where in it you can find and read about its various lore and history. Although aside from being a very narrative focused game, Lost Library is also a puzzle game. I think at the heart of it, Lost Library is a puzzle game. It's filled with very cryptic and strange puzzles that are intentionally designed to be very difficult to figure out. Often you're effectively given the pieces of the puzzle and you just have to figure out how it all goes together. The puzzles are usually very simple when you understand how they work, though I've been adding in a lot of random number generation to them to really keep you on your toes about how these puzzles work, so that each time you play there's something about the puzzle will change or something will be different. Usually it's just that the solution changes, but I have had it suggested to me before that I should make it so that the entire puzzle just changes in certain areas, which would certainly be pretty funky. But we'll see. And there are all sorts of puzzles, all kinds of puzzles, like combination locks, cipher codes, all that, all the good stuff. Many of the puzzles actually have multiple solutions as well. This goes into the branching story paths. The way in which you complete puzzles will often change how stories play out, and you can get completely different endings depending on how you change the puzzle. The story and the puzzles are very integrated into one another. The puzzles often tell part of the story or reveal part of the lore. A lot of puzzles are also designed to introduce you to the different enemy types as well. They're all done very purposefully minded. But yeah, the puzzles are meant to be very cruel. They're meant to be punishingly hard, which I'm sure everybody watching this is an absolute sadist and enjoys that kind of stuff. I find it's primarily because of how abstract the puzzles are. The two puzzles that I see people rage quit at the most are the Man I Was and Feeding the Books. Look, feeding the books isn't hard, you just have a bad reaction time. Now, I think it would have been really funny to just not explain the branching narratives, or that puzzles may have completely different solutions, and just watch people play it and get very confused as to why they have ended up with entirely different stories. I don't feel like it would be wise to, leave out one of Lost Library's primary selling points. But yeah, even though it's narrative in the full game, there will be kind of open worldy sort of elements. It's designed to encourage you to explore. And I will say that for the demo, there is 4 endings. I don't know how many endings are going to be in the full game because I haven't completed all the stories that I want to complete, and there are more that I want to add. Many stories may also have multiple endings. Puzzles come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, from riddles to combination locks to ciphers, or even some of the old classics that you get for RPG Maker games, finding a piece and just trying to figure out where it goes. Another really good puzzle element is sanity. So your character has a set sanity that can go up and down depending on what you do. And things will change depending on what your sanity is at, and it's not one of those things where, you've got to keep your sanity high or you'll die. You will die if it gets to 0, but there are certain things that you have to do in the game that you can only do with a lower sanity, for example. Whether having a lower or higher sanity or not is a good thing just really depends on the context. It'll change not only puzzle solutions, but it'll also change how certain objects in your environment interact with you, or even how some of the monsters interact with you. And in the demo, there are a couple sections in the game where you need your sanity to be low, there are a couple sections where you need it to be high. Of course, this shouldn't have to be said, but Not everything in the demo is, finalised. That's not exactly final of how it's going to be. And so sanity is one of those things where it's like, it's going to be like expanded on much more in the full game. It's pretty alright for what it is in the demo, but I do plan on doing a lot more with the whole sanity meter. So if you want to start insane maxing and just go as kooky crazy as possible, then you can do that. You just may not like the outcomes you get. Although actually for one of the good endings, or I say good, one like the more, none of the endings I have planned are particularly good, I should actually say. But for one of the good, in gigantic quotation marks, endings, you do have to get like insane at certain points for that, I suppose. But yeah, sanity is something that's supposed to fluctuate depending on what you do, and you can intentionally raise it or lower it through certain actions. But like how the puzzles are, pretty abstract, what will and won't increase or decrease your sanity is also pretty abstract, so that's also something you have to discover. But now we can move on to the monsters that lurk within the decrepit halls of the library, which I'm sure throughout the course of the game you'll become all too familiar with. Now, I'm only really going to go over the monsters that appear in the demo. There are very many more monsters in the full game, all with their own interesting and unique gimmick. Although while each monster has its own unique gimmick and methods of avoiding them, they all do still perform the ultimate goal of introducing you to the game over screen. The monster you can encounter first is the carnivorous buck. Since the library's abandonment, many of its books have just been left to starve. As a result, many of its books have sprung to life, crawling the halls of the library, searching for brains to eat. Why brains? Well, for knowledge, why else? Carnivorous bucks are probably the most common enemy, but the most easiest to avoid. They wander aimlessly, never really pursuing the player. However, while they don't actively pursue the player, they are commonly found in areas with very tight spaces, meaning that it's very easy for them to cut you off. And given their movements are aimless and random, it's very easy for them to trap you. And so often patience is a necessity when dealing with them. I am sure they will become a common annoyance for all of those wandering the library. After that, the next most notable monster are the skulkers. Skulkers appear as faded apparitions, shadowy creatures. They tend to be very territorial and can be found tucked away in little corners of the library, usually just guarding that area and killing, really, anything that comes within the vicinity of them. They can be easy to avoid, as long as you just stay away from their territory. The problem is knowing when a skulker is nearby, because they are completely invisible to those who are sane of mind. This is where the game's sanity mechanics come back in once again, because in order to see them you have to have a low sanity. The main problem is that if one is in an area where you need to go. Luckily for you though, they really don't like salt water and will scamper away if you chuck it at them. Of course, you need to be able to see that one's coming first. Remember to pay attention to the notes that you can find around the library. These cryptic messages do actually mean something. I am working on some mechanic that lets you know one is nearby even when, you're fully sane so you can't see them. Maybe some audio clues. But that's for the full game, that'll be in the full game. The next monster that appears in the demo is not named in the demo. Well, it is if you know about File 15, but if you know, you know. But I shall reveal its name here. This thing is called the Gorgaunt. And it isn't a one-off creature. Remember, pay attention to what the notes say. The Gorgaunts are the corpses of those who have died in the library, who have been since reanimated. They come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. Some are harmless, but the majority of them follow the same principle. And that is that the moment they clap eyes on the player, they will relentlessly hunt them down. There is no easy way to defeat them other than just running away. They are the most simple, yet the most aggressive monster that there is. And because of this, the most hazardous. If you find one, just hope you can outrun it. That covers the main monsters that you'll be seeing in the demo, though I suppose the porcelain doll does count. Now the one you see in the demo is just a part of the puzzle, all it really does is killing you for getting the puzzle wrong. However, porcelain dolls will be a reoccurring enemy in the full game, so I might as well just explain them here. Aside from the differences of that the porcelain doll in the demo has a blue dress while the ones in the full game will have red dresses, well, the main difference is that the red dressed ones are actually up and about and moving. On higher sanities, porcelain dolls will be virtually harmless. They'll do nothing other than sit there and do whatever it is porcelain dolls do. However, as your sanity gets lower, they become more aggressive and will do more damage to the player. This being another mechanic that works with your sanity. It's a good example of how sanity isn't really about just not letting it get to zero because, I don't know, you'll lose your mind or whatever. It's a balancing game that really just changes the way you interact with the library and its inhabitants. I of course have many more monsters planned that I don't really want to talk about here, especially since some of them are heavily tied in with the story, and many of the monsters haven't been fully coded yet. But we'll move off of the topic of the monsters for now and get onto our accreditations. So Lost Library is a familiar old RPG Maker horror game of being a small child with a big head lost in another world. If you know anything about RPG Maker horror, then you'll be very familiar with that premise. And while Lost Library certainly is a horror game, it's not designed to be your usual in-the-face, scary, jump scare kind of horror game. There are of course scary monsters as we have just gone over, but the horror of the game is more designed to be unsettling and ambient. That you are in a very dangerous world that you can never fully understand, which plays a lot into how its story works. It is designed to have a multifaceted story. It isn't designed to run from point A to point B, but rather small changes in things you do, the way you solve puzzles, the items you have, will create new branching story paths. There are very many storylines and many endings that I have planned for the game, and since the storylines all happen in the same area, it also allows you to jump between them, and what you do in one storyline may severely affect how another plays out. It's really confusing to explain. It's going to be one of those things where when the game is actually up and out, you'll know what I mean. But it's going to be filled with various secrets and references, so it really caters to those who like to dig into every nook and cranny and explore to their heart's content. I designed the story the way I did because I think more games should follow that multifaceted story kind of route, because I think a lot more narrative games could certainly benefit from this. I suppose you have things like, let's say Baldur's Gate, the Dungeons and Dragons series, that's like an RPG where you go in and you affect the story, and it's very impressively made. Same with the Elder Scrolls series. But the main difference here is in these games you are playing you're playing a stand-in for yourself. In Lost Library, you don't play you play as Victoria. But why is this important? Well, it's because in games like Elder Scrolls or sort of like Dungeons and Dragons, you're making your own story. But in other narrative games, which is, the majority of them, you aren't making your own story, you're being told a story. However, in Lost Library, it is designed so you are discovering a story. You are being put into Victoria's shoes and then thrown into the ball pit that is the library, and just told go figure it out. The story at its heart is just designed to be discovered. I don't know of any other game to have designed a story in the same way. I feel like the closest I can think of is the Fallout games, though they still lean more into the UIU kind of storytelling. Look, we're not here to do a video essay on the kind of storytelling that Lost Library is. It's hard to explain. I'm sure some YouTuber anywhere between 30 and a billion subscribers will happily explain the kind of storytelling Lost Library is. Of course, that relies on this way of telling a story working. I hope it does. Who knows, there may be reasons as to why this type of storytelling isn't a big thing. But designing the story so far, it's been pretty decent, so high hopes, gentlemen. But as I'd said about 3 minutes ago, we need to get on to accreditations. So the vast majority of the game has been made by me. I designed all the puzzles, I'm the one who's written the story, designed all the characters, the backstories and whatnot. All of the textures were made in MS Paint. Yes, that is real. I made the textures for this game in MS Paint, along with the character models, just because it's easy to use and anything else scares me. It's probably going to be easier to tell you what I didn't make. And let's start off with the character art. So when characters are talking, you'll see art of them pop up as a helpful visual indicator of what's going on. It helps get a grasp for who's who and who's talking. The character art wasn't made by me. I originally was going to do it myself. However, a friend of mine called Silver is a very good artist and she wanted to start doing art professionally, and so I offered to pay her to do the art for this game, in the hopes that it may help kickstart her career as a freelance artist online. Of course, here is her Twitter, and all of the links to her social medias will be down in the description. If you want to see examples of her work or commission anything, then you'll be sure to check her out. The other part of the game that I did not do is the music. Now, with games, especially narrative games, I think the soundtrack is one of the most important components. And I want the Lost Library soundtrack not just to set the perfect mood and the tone, but to be something that can be enjoyable to listen to abstracted from the game. And the fellow who has been tasked with this mission is Riku Matsuo, or by his YouTube channel, Riku Slimefox. His YouTube channel will also be linked in the description. So if you find yourself enjoying the Lost Library soundtrack, then you can thank him. I'll also be linking his Fiverr page. In his description it says, "So my works are not professional." This is a lie. The melody for the main title theme, which there are various different iterations of, is just perfect. There is still a lot of the soundtrack that I need to get done. A lot of the current soundtrack is just stand-in stuff, rather than Lost Library's own unique OST. But I do want to see if I can commission Riku to do the entire soundtrack. I don't know if it's really his forte to do all the monster chase music and all that, but when I first went to him, he did say he doesn't really do horror, and you know, for somebody who doesn't do horror, he really has made some very exceptional horror music. But we'll have to see as game development moves along. I also wish to discuss with Riku about how I'm going to actually release the music outside of the game, because I do want to put it on YouTube for people to just listen to. As said, I want people to be able to listen to it abstracted from the game, but since he's got his own YouTube channel, I don't know if he would rather me just uploading it here on the Ravensfell YouTube channel, or if he would just like to upload it on his own YouTube channel. So you can thank Silver and Riku for bringing aspects of this game to fruition. There are certain elements that they've both brought to the game that it just wouldn't be the same without them. I'll be very excited to work with them more throughout the game's development. This is me interjecting quite a bit after the recording. Another fellow called Kristian has helped produce some of the soundtrack for this as well. He's done more of the fast-paced, high-intensity parts of the soundtrack. I'll be linking his socials as well. If you want to know who made what, then it'll be in the description of the videos when I upload the soundtrack. Development. One other thing that I also have to mention for the music is the use of Suno AI. Now I understand it's probably a cardinal sin to use AI, especially if I've got Riku, like why use AI for music? Well, this is where the stand-in music comes in. Either I've just been using music from very old games as stand-in, or I've just been using whatever the AI gives me that kind of fits. The issue though with an AI is it's a massive ball ache to actually get it to do what you want it to do. And not to mention, it makes things far too complicated. The AI will start putting in all these other random bits and pieces and instruments in that just kind of overdo it and just ruin the tone of the game. And so AI tools on their own just really don't cut it. It's a very cool tool and fun to play around with is Suno AI, but for a project like Lost Library, it doesn't really work. However, the AI is very good at remixing things, and so when playing around with it, I do like what it did for Lost in the Dark, which is the melody for the main title theme. That being the Lost Library and Lost Library version 2. I'm not personally for or against AI. I can see its uses and limitations. If it works, I guess. But I do much prefer working with actual people. And trust me, a lot of Suno AI's music has needed a lot of editing and trimming and redesigning. So I'm sorry, little AI buddy, but you're not taking over the world yet. But some of its music is just too good to throw away, so I will be keeping some of what Suno AI has given me. But for the majority of the soundtrack, I do wish to replace with Riku's music. But I'll finish off deep-throating Riku for the time being then. But yeah, I want the OST up on YouTube. Whether it's on mine or Riku's channel is just going to depend on what he wants. I guess the next question that is coming up is, when do I plan on releasing the game? That I don't know. So currently it's just being made on the side compared to other projects. Now if Lost Library, I don't know, if it takes off and it gets popular, then I will probably put a lot more focus into it. So when will it be released is I have no idea. Probably not within the next year though. If I focus on it a bit more, then maybe it could come out sometime next year. But that's just me estimating. There are no promises, there are no set dates. How much will it cost? I'm sure is another pretty big question. That is another I don't really know. Probably around £3.50, or if you're an American, that's going to be about $5, I'd say. But that's another I can only speculate, and probably think about it more when the game gets to a more releasable point. What we will get a definite answer to though is, what platforms will it be released on? Well, obviously itch.io. That's what the demo's already up on, so obviously there. Probably not the Epic Games Store. And Steam, many of you may be wondering, is it going to get uploaded to Steam? Well, definitely not the demo. Definitely not the demo. It costs like 100 monies to get it up on Steam. And so I would like the full game to be on Steam. But that is, you know, the full game. While it's just the demo, that's probably not going to be on Steam because it's just not worth the money. Although actually I might be wrong about that. It being up on Steam might be good advertising. So I guess throwing the demo up on Steam is a very big maybe right now. Maybe, you know, maybe if I gather together the money to do so, maybe I will, but not right now. At least not for a long time. Now with all that out of the way, there are certain things I will say that concern me about releasing this game, and that is it getting popular. Now you may be thinking, but wouldn't you like your work to get popular? And why yes, I would like my work to be appreciated for the craftsmanship that it is, but you see, I've seen things. I've seen what happens to games with cute characters and horror elements. Like something like Locust, which is something I'm slowly releasing and fleshing out as time goes on. I'd like that to get popular. But Lost Library, have you seen what they do to these kinds of games when they get popular? The moment I see somebody make a video like Don't Call Victoria at 3 AM challenge, I will have to destroy them. Although I can at least respect the hustle, I guess, of content farms. There are other, much more darker forces that I'm far more afraid of. And before any of you nasty little weirdos online get any ideas, Victoria is only 12 years old. Well, look, she's almost 13, I should say, by the events of the game. So she's about 12 years and 10 months old. I have the Jantine ISA monitoring the situation. If any debauchery is uncovered, you will be destroyed. She's also from Yorkshire. There's another little fact about Victoria. She's a little Yorkshire gal. Now Lily on the other hand, Lily's perfectly legal, so go hog wild with that. Of course I need to make sure these questions are all answered, because in playtesting I found that all my friends are creeps, and whenever I show them new characters that I've designed for Lost Library, the most common question I seem to be asked is she breedable? Unless it's a male character, then they just get ignored. It's the woes of being a creative, I suppose. So that is about all I really want to discuss. I mean, there's a lot more that I want to discuss, but, you know, I'll probably end up giving too much away then. And a big part of Lost Library is the sort of discovery of its narrative. So I'm staying tight-lipped on what more you'll be able to find past the demo. Though if you are attentive and start paying attention to some of the notes or other things around the game, you may be able to hazard some guesses at some things that may be in store for you. So I think that's all I really want to say for Lost Library right now. Often I cap these videos off with just explaining what I plan on doing next. For reasons I'm sure you're able to discern, I'm not just going to go into every detail of what I plan to do for Lost Library. While a lot of works that I've done, with Locust being the only thing other than Lost Library right now that I've actually released, they are designed to be multifaceted. Locust was designed to be a setting that encompasses a wide variety of projects and ideas that I may have. Lost Library is just designed to be a one-hit wonder. Currently, I have no plans beyond the main game. I mean, of course, my plans of leaving it as a small indie game may change in the future. I mean, my original plans for the game was just making it a small 20-minute adventure, and it's certainly developed to be much bigger than that. And I suppose it isn't unheard of that a small indie game may develop into a multimedia franchise. But I have no plans of it, I can only put something out there and see how the internet takes it. For better, or for worse. Now, in terms of RPG Maker games themselves, after I'm finished making Lost Library, I really would like to make some kind of murder mystery game, I think. But that's just more things to pile on the big long list of things that I eventually want to make. But, you know, I have a Discord server, and the link to that will be in the description if you want to come talk to me and discuss any of my plans or things that I want to do. Of course, on the topic of links, the people that I've worked with, their links, like the links to find them, will also be in the description and probably the comment section, because if I know anything about YouTube, people check the comment section a lot more than they check the description. If you want to support me, I do have a Patreon. Donations would be very much appreciated, and most of the money that I make goes into my games that I then put out for you wondrous fellows. So in a certain way, you'll be making your value back, and also feeding my crippling food addiction. I can't go a day without eating, it's very tragic indeed. So with that, I think I'll close out the video. Be sure to leave a like, leave racial slurs in the comment section, and I will see you next time.